All right, so we're live. I'm Raul Ramirez with the Catch Wrestling Alliance, where we help you elevate your grappling, and together we keep real wrestling alive. And so we're here with a very special guest, the author of Milagro. Let me try to make sure you can see it well enough where, yeah, the it's not glaring, right? So Milagro, Héroe de las Calles. Yeah, so we're here with Guillermo Xegarra. So welcome.
How's it going, Raul?
It's going well. So for people who maybe like are already subscribed to us or have known us for a little while, Guillermo had been on here was it like last year, a few months ago. Do you know
Yeah,
remember?
I was actually on here when this funded.
Yes. So that's exactly what I was gonna say. So it's like when so so what happened was is you had an or actually you go ahead and tell us because it led up to us working together and then having a crowdfunding campaign to get this graphic novel out.
Yeah, so the creator of the character, Max Strackbine, he came up with the idea. He got myself and Ross Radke together as a team. He gave me about 7 prompts. Um, things like the character doesn't talk, death in the ring, which you kind of see in the first part of it. But there were some prompts given, and then he just let me go and come up with the story and the themes and pretty much run the direction that I wanted to go in. So originally we were going to try to shop it around, but we just decided to crowdfund it. It was the first time Matt and I had crowdfunded anything. Ross crowdfunded a kaiju series called Stumped before, and it's actually he's in the middle of a crowdfunding thing now. So if any of you guys like his art, please go support him. But anyway, we yeah we started. I think it was like 4 days in. While it was on with you, we actually got funded, which was pretty wild. I had no idea. Didn't ex- I didn't even know if we were gonna get funded, much less get funded in less than a week.
Yeah, I was your lucky charm.
Yeah, yeah, it's good to be back too, man. Thank you.
Yeah, no, my pleasure. So, just my involvement was that you actually wanted to incorporate like realistic, like catch wrestling
Mhm.
into the main character, Milagro. Can you tell us about that?
So I don't really have. I've trained some jujitsu, a little bit of judo, JKD, like MMA kind of stuff, boxing, kickboxing, but I've never really wrestled. And it's a shame because we had a really good wrestling program in Jersey where I grew up, but
Mhm.
I didn't wrestle, and wrestling was like the one thing that I know the least about. I had some manuals and some ideas and some moves, but I didn't know like about the transitions. And there were like things that I was doing from like a jujitsu perspective, from the bottom position compared to like the stuff that you teach with like the rolls and everything and like controlling the hand. Just, stuff that I wasn't really used to. So yeah, I asked you specifically. I guess it's okay to give away spoilers, right?
Up to you.
Well, there's specific moves in there. There's a specific move that you helped
Mhm.
us with. It's a very, it's funny. It's a move that people say doesn't work, but I've seen it in a couple of like grappling matches and MMA matches. And
Mhm.
you showed exactly how it would work using like control and wrestling principles and all those kinds of things. It's like a classic kind of showy catch kind of move.
Yeah, yeah, no, and what's really cool is that it's so so we actually someone who's already commented this handle pelon. So he's waiting for his copy. So yeah, we don't want to give too much away, but it's really well
Thank
drawn.
you.
So it's really well illustrated, right? So you can actually see how the techniques work, and then not only like how they work or how they're applied, but then how you can follow through. And that was one of the things that I definitely wanted to see in that because sometimes even in movies actually especially in movies where it's like they have a choreographed fight scene and then like the angle is like switching like all over the place really fast and you can't quite understand what's going on but these fight scenes in this graphic novel which is really cool because it is just there on the page but it's well directed so that you can actually see and understand what's going on.
Well, first of all, thank you. And I will not give too much away. Thank you for anyone who helped support us. Um, yeah, I had access to a lot of fighting manuals, and then you made like a video for us for this one particular technique. And then I just borrowed from a bunch of your videos, like your series on escaping the bottom. Um, I borrowed from that and just kind of had this back and forth battle. Plus, I threw in moves, specific moves, more like high flying, high amplitude moves that all came from real fights. There's like four classic fights that I borrowed from, techniques that I borrowed from that were included in like the climactic fight scene in the middle of it. But catch was definitely like a part of it. I had different boxing styles. I had more like a Philly shell and more just like a classic like guard. Um, there were a lot of little different things. One of the main characters is left-handed, and the attacks come from the other side. That you probably picked up on that.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, there's different aspects of the story that all tied together, and just put a lot of research, and I've always been a fan of like fight comics and like and just like martial arts movies and things, and wanted to get as much of that in the book as possible.
Yeah, and I think that's what's special about it too, because like what we're seeing, I can only speak about what I see around LA, but say like last year, that movie for the anime Demon Slayer from the Japanese anime for people who don't know, it's a Japanese animation that came from a Japanese comic book, and it was like the number one movie in the United States, and in LA, like the train, our mass transit had Demon Slayer like all over the train. It was really cool because it was a movie about a haunted train, and so a lot of Latinos are, I think, really into this. But then even from what I've seen in like some of the reporting, where it's like around the world, there's
Mhm.
there's like a shift away from like these big time superhero type people with like superpowers and all that, like just so there's a shift away from people wanting to just read about that to like more realistic, or at least more story based uh like well, stories. And so I think Milagro falls into this category where it's not like someone's superpowers, but it's an actual person dealing with real problems. And it's so it does have a mix of like, so you have like the fighting stuff, right, conflict, but you also have like the familial and like the community aspect. Is there kind of like something about the story that you can kind of tell, or at least tell people about the foundation to kind of maybe get them interested in reading the rest of the story?
The familial stuff, I mean, like we all have our conflicts with our families, and Latino families tend to be really close, and a lot of times the conflicts can be loud, and go on for long periods of time. So I wanted to capture some of that in the story. Um, there's an aspect of strong female characters that I write about. And, like I think about like my mother, my wife, people that I've known, my best friend, all these strong women that I've been around. And I kind of wanted to make sure that there were elements of that. The community thing it was really important. We dealt a lot with poverty. I didn't want to get too preachy on anything, but I mean, the poverty is part of the story. Being down and down on your luck, hard times is definitely like part of the story. And redemption is really what the story is about in a lot of ways. Redemption for the individuals involved, redemption for the community. The way the story ends, you can kind of see where the road to redemption leads. After everything that happens to them, like where it starts in the ring and it just kind of gets kind of crazy from there. We're way out of the ring by the time we get towards the end of the story.
Yeah, so it starts off as Milagro is a pro wrestler, or can you tell us about at least how much of that can, at least how much of the beginning can you tell us, so people kind of understand who the story is about?
So Milagro is a character that Matt came up with. Matt Strackbine developed this character early 2007. We came up with some backstories and some things. But one of the things that one of the prompts that Matt gave me was he wanted a death in the ring. That was like one of the first things that he said. And So I made it like a mentor death in the ring. Um, I'm trying to figure out how much to reveal. So in my world, one of the things that I allude to that I really want to explore, and if we get a chance to do more, is
Hmm.
this world. Like in Milagro, what happened in Japan, where wrestling kind of more like stiff style wrestling morphed into like MMA, happens in Mexico. You know, something happens with lucha libre where there's like a stiff style of lucha libre that incorporates like catch wrestling and different martial arts, different grappling styles, just kind of what happened in Japan. So they kind of do this like high flying kind of stiff style thing that's a part of the story. And it starts off with a death in the ring. He kills his mentor in the ring, and he's homeless. Meanwhile, some there's some gang activity in the town that has some history behind it, and he's essentially coming back to help with what's going to happen in the town.
Yeah, that's a great like a foundation setting there. So I think so. Hopefully, that's enough for people to get interested in the story and like trying to find out what happens because it's already like a very interesting like backstory that is actually the beginning of the graphic novels. That's what you see first. And I think we're not giving away too much, right?
No, you can go to the Kickstarter and see like the first 5 pages. You can see the whole opening match. This image in the background is like part of it's the image of a German suplex with the guy inverted in his head, his heels over his head. You can totally see that and get the idea for the story, or at least the opening part of the story from the Kickstarter.
Yes, and so that kick. So for people who don't know, the Kickstarter was successful, and so now you can actually buy it. So that's why I have the actual physical copy in my hand, right? So actually, I wanted to let people know that in the description box below is the link to actually buy the buy this graphic novel. So it should be there. Let us know if it's not, because we'll definitely direct you to that link.
Yeah, rossradke.com, the incredible artist that's really put these fight sequences and really kind of just went all out, putting this thing together.
Yeah, yeah, and it looks great. And at least from my perspective, I think it definitely leaves, or it should leave the reader wanting more. So I think this is a really great start. So hopefully
Uh,
it can just continue.
yeah, I would love to do more. I have so many ideas. There were deliberate seeds that were planted that I didn't want to. Sorry, I don't know if you heard that. Um, she gets a little noisy sometimes. Yeah, there were seeds that were planted for future storylines. There are things that I wanted to explore. There were things that were just shown quickly over like a couple panels,
Hmm.
um, that I definitely want to jump into. And actually, one of the I would say like I think it's the last panel in the second to last page of the book, um, sets up the next storyline if
Hmm.
we get a chance to do more.
Okay, great. Well, what
And
kind of? Oh, go ahead.
well, it was something that it was a choice that Ross made artistically, and it was something that I'd noticed, and it just kind of kept kicking around in my head, and that is going to lead to the next storyline. Like there's something about that image in that last image.
Well, how has like now that Milagro's out, how has it been received? Like what kind of feedback are you getting from the public?
So far, the feedback's been good. People seem to really like it on different levels. People like the characters. A lot of like martial arts guys like the fighting sequences. A lot of Latinos appreciate seeing people that look like them and their families and their friends and their communities in there too. You know, um, I'm not Mexican, but I wanted to make sure that I honored Mexican culture, and as best as I possibly could. And Ross made it a point to draw the characters like people. He didn't want like any sombreros, any caricatures, nothing like that. He gave the characters the respect and the time that they deserved, and that's another aspect that I've heard that people seem to like about it. So far, the reception's been good. We've been really fortunate, and I just hope we get to do another.
Yeah. Is like how long until you find out whether or not that could happen?
No idea. Matt recently moved,
Mm-hmm.
so he's going to be working on some things for a little while, and I think he's got another project coming up. Ross is already onto Stumped. I'm writing like short stories for now,
Mm-hmm.
um, like solar. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the genre of solar punk.
Punks on the Sun.
Solar punk is a genre. It's like the opposite of like cyberpunk. The
Mm-hmm.
last page of Milagro really alludes to solar punk, right? Like a lot of solar punk is like technology, like renewable technology integrated with nature, like a lot of like, eco homes and those kinds of things, and like
Mm-hmm.
what that world could be like, or a lot of the stories like are things leaning towards that or leading towards that world, or like issues within that world. There was a really cool one called Zabala Goes West, in like an anthology, or Zabala Dreams of the West. This one anthology about like the Mayans, like if their civilization was able to continue, like what would their technology be like, their religion, their culture, like just really cool kind of. It's a really cool movement. But I'm writing right now. I'm working on stories for that, and that last page of Milagro is definitely like a tribute to like a solar punk world.
Oh, awesome, awesome. Do you publish on your through your own website or anything, or is there any way people
No,
can
I'm going to
find
try
you?
to submit them, so we'll see how that goes.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
if I always think that, like I said, since this was like self-published, it'd be great to get your stuff out there. Also, even if you have to self-publish it.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, the thing that I'm going to actually submit it to, there's a solar punk magazine that was crowdfunded on Kickstarter. So, they take submissions, they have people that read them and decide if they get published or whatever. But that's essentially what I'm going for, is like another, I'm trying to get in with like another self-published entity.
Hmm. Awesome, awesome. Well, actually, I want people to know that besides the graphic novel, I'm not giving away the story or anything like that, but in the back they actually give a lot of bonuses. So a lot of bonus materials about like how they put the story together, different design elements that they worked on. So you actually get a lot of really cool extra stuff. So if you get your copy, so pretty awesome stuff. And then you can see, let me see your face there.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's not just the graphic novel. You actually get a bunch of extra things in your hard copy. So the link is below to get that.
Yeah, we wanted to make sure we kept room for that. When we were trying to shop this around, we wanted to like meet all the parameters for like creators that didn't really have any kind of reputation. So like 22 pages, 50 words per panel, kind of spread the panels out, not too many pages with too many panels, use it more like an effect. And so we did that. So the story is like 66 pages. I believe the book itself is like 88. So there's a bunch of extra stuff at the end that these guys all put together. And I think the art, even if people don't like the characters or the story, the art just speaks for itself.
Yeah, I agree, and that's the thing. It's like that's one of the ways to be able to see like the quality of the storytelling. It's like when you don't necessarily have to pack the page with so much, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that it's visual storytelling. And one of the highest forms of visual storytelling is just to let the pictures tell the story, whether it's like silent film or just long sequences in comic books with like little to no dialogue or whatever, just letting the pictures and the images just tell the story itself.
Yeah, and I think you guys did that really well here.
Thank you.
So, oh yeah, I was gonna say like, so you're talking about like the solar punk stuff. Is there any other like influences that you put into Milagro? And I know you meant we were talking about catch wrestling, obviously, because this is you're on the catch wrestling channel, right?
Oh
But
yeah.
but any other influences on Milagro?
Um Community is one that I really want to explore more of. There's a whole mythology. Like there's a training sequence in there in like a gym, right? And I
Mhm.
have like a whole thing around that gym, like a whole story idea and storyline around the gym. The character that's in mid suplex, his name is El Oso, the bear. I have a whole storyline about how he got that name and what that name signifies. There's just a ton of storylines that I want to explore more of as time goes on. There's a bunch of side characters in the story that have significant storylines, and I want to explore some of those, as time goes on. But we'll see. Matt settling down, and so far the reception's been good. Those guys are really busy. Ross is doing Stomp now, and who knows what he has planned afterwards. A big reason why we were able to get this done was because it fit into Ross's schedule. He actually had a project kind of fall through, and he ended up having time to do Milagro. He's in pretty high demand, and was even before this. I think this is just going to make him more in demand.
Mm. All right. Well, hopefully this can continue, and that's the thing. It's like it sounds like you already like you already have a lot of the elements of a great story, right? And so and that's part of it, right? Where like if you have all these backstories that you already know and you already kind of have them fleshed out already, then it's that those are all the elements. So hopefully it can continue.
Yeah, one of the backstories is the creation of the art itself, like the training that they did and how it all came together, and how Milagro was able to know all these different arts, and how this place trained. Like catch wrestling and wrestling in general, different styles of wrestling, different styles of grappling. Just like in Japan, they would have access to karate guys, boxing. Mexico has such a rich history of boxing on its own. Like, why, that could definitely be an element to the story, and there could be characters based around that. There's so many different ways that I hope we get to go with this.
Yeah. Well, so then now we'll go ahead and ask like more of a personal perspective. Then, uh, so you liked having Milagro be more of a catch wrestling based fighter. So
Mhm.
what, like, why do you think catch wrestling is a good foundation for like not only sport but like self defense?
Yeah, it's a fascinating art. The thing that really piqued my interest was just watching Sakuraba. I don't know if he ever really called himself a catch wrestler, but he trained with who was it? Billy Robinson, right?
Yes.
Yeah, he trained with Billy Robinson. He had like a really solid, what was it, freestyle? I think he was like a freestyle wrestler in
Hmm.
college, placed in like the States, I think. Something. He was a pretty high ranking amateur wrestler in Japan, and had like a really solid foundation. And I mean, he was the Gracie hunter.
Hmm.
He beat all those Gracies, and he beat everybody for a while, and he was undersized for a lot of those fights. And that just, I've always been like a huge fan of Sakuraba. And in some ways, like I just kind of wanted to capture some of that style in Milagro's fighting style, and just have an excuse to like have this, like, just explore catch wrestling a little bit more.
Yeah, actually, it's really great that you bring that up. Hopefully, this is not too out of the blue, but so you mentioned that even though Sakuraba had freestyle training, it was like the catch wrestling that kind of gave him that advantage over the Gracies. Then there's this other story. For those of you who might not know this, like we have like the two brothers, Dave Schultz and Mark Schultz, and so two great American freestyle wrestlers. One unfortunately was murdered by John DuPont. So it's like a really famous story. But Mark in his kind of like semi or was biography or kind of semi biography where they talk he called Foxcatcher. They made it into a movie that wasn't necessarily so accurate to the book, but in the book, he talks about trying jujitsu and being able to pin everybody, but then ultimately getting submitted, and that's what kind of turned him on to learning jujitsu, right? But I think that kind of is a big illustration of how catch wrestling is different, where we have one of the best in the United States at freestyle and getting submitted, and writing about it and how he realized at that moment that without the submissions, he's like that. That's ultimately like a weakness or like a big hole in the game. So but you have someone who has the with catch wrestling so successful against all these other styles, right? So I think that is also why we can see in Milagro that he can use the wrestling for pro wrestling or for sport, but then also even for self defense.
Well, it's really interesting. Like these wrestlers coming out of Dagestan, right? Like
Hmm.
Khabib, Islam, they have like the solid wrestling foundation, right? But
Hmm.
those guys, I guess, get a lot of their submissions from judo and sambo. But they still have that like wrestling approach, the top control, like all those basic wrestling principles. They use a lot of pinning principles. You know, I've seen you do breakdowns on like Khabib and like how he pins guys down, and I've seen you make videos on Danaher talking about the importance of pinning. So just that was something that I wanted to have translate in his style. Like people that are more into martial arts will probably pick up on that, like his top game, how he approaches the bottom, the submissions that he chooses to use, how he uses them in different situations. Um, that was, yeah, I definitely, in a lot of ways, like it's almost like an esoteric art, right? Like not a lot of people know it, right? Not a lot of people train it. It's not as readily available as like jujitsu or judo or some of these other arts. So yeah, I just thought it would be like this neat kind of thing to explore in like this fictional world. It was kind of based in Japan in a lot of ways.
Yeah, no, well, I definitely thank you for including that, or including catch wrestling, because in a way that it makes it accurate. So it's like that pro wrestling has its roots in catch wrestling, and that's what spread around the world and influenced the world. But it's so crazy, kind of like how you're saying, where it's like its influence is seen like all over the world, but like a lot of people don't know the root, right? Or they don't. It's there, but it's kind of invisible at the same time.
One thing I do want to explore too, like with some of the backstories, there's like indigenous styles of wrestling in like northern Mexico too, right?
Yeah, there's all kinds of uh, basically there's a all up and down the Americas. You'll find some really interesting styles.
Yeah, I've never seen really anything on it. Like it'd be cool if somebody did like a documentary or something on that. But yeah, I definitely, that's something else. You know, there's a bit of a nod to like indigenous cultures in Milagro and some traditions in Mexico and things that were alluded to that are some other things I'd like to explore as well. Um, but yeah, definitely like different grappling styles and like yeah, I mean it's pro wrestling. Like there was a time when pro wrestling pretty much was catch, right? Like it was like its own sport, its
Hmm.
own art, kind of like boxing. You know, boxing is a sport and an art, and that, or at least that's how I always thought about it, right?
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. Where it's like it's called pro wrestling nowadays, but back in the day, pro wrestling was the actual professional version of wrestling, where it was an actual contest where you can win by pin or submission. And unfortunately, even like say like the great wrestling historian Mike Chapman, he often kind of gives a date, basically around World War I. The majority of the matches were predetermined, right? To put it nicely, right? Um, so it kind of it went predetermined quite early on, which is which I think it's really sad. But then you see nowadays we still have like pro wrestling, so then now people just they get this weird confused notion as to what wrestling is, and or even like the other thing that kind of it doesn't necessarily annoy me too much, but I hear it all the time where it's like people are calling freestyle and folk style wrestling like this is real wrestling, which indeed it is a true style, real wrestling styles, but they both came from catch wrestling, and a long time ago those styles would be called amateur, and then if you did catch wrestling where you learned all the submission holds, that would be pro, and that'd be the one of the main differences between a professional and an amateur, where like you're not, as a professional, you're playing to actually like beat somebody, and then the amateur might be going for a pin or points or whatever, because they had they had those like point systems and shorter time limits, no submissions and whatnot. But there was a real difference, and the professional wrestler was more dangerous, right?
Yeah, no, that you hear a lot of like those stories from like Carney wrestling and those types of things. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like a lost art, you know, and I would imagine too, as wrestling like evolved more to like performance art
Hmm.
rather than actual competition, the training evolved more towards performance art, right? But
Yeah.
then even like in like the WWE or whatever, they started doing like more MMA type holds. Like you started seeing like arm bars and all kinds of like, you know, jujitsu style arm bars and I don't know, like things that look like the guard or whatever, you know. Um, so I don't know. It seems like it kind of goes back and forth sometimes.
Yeah, I think so. Especially with the rise of MMA, then I think they had to kind of, uh, add a little bit of those elements, and then they brought in Ronda Rousey and all that too. So then they brought in more of arm bars and all that.
Yeah. So yeah, it's interesting. Like, you know, guys started throwing like more. Well, but that was always kind of a thing too. Like, there were always guys like Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, like these like incredible martial arts looking guys that could throw like kicks and you know make it look really flashy or whatever. That's always kind of been part of the tradition as well. You know.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. And, those are the things that still make it somewhat more like exciting or even believable. So I think there's always been that element in there. Pro wrestling itself does have a lot of these fascinating elements, and like I do know like a lot of these. I've met a lot of pro wrestlers, and so it's really interesting though to see their training, even though um, they might not necessarily know like even jujitsu or like the martial aspect of it, but a lot of the techniques are very very close to real moves, and it's just a lot of times they're trained to help their partner out to make it so they get tossed higher or whatever,
Right.
but it does have like its root in something real.
Yeah, and then you have stiff style, you know, that whole stiff style in Japan that looks pretty real, you know, it looks like a scripted MMA fight almost, you know, or like script like Pancrase, where like who knows how many of those fights were real and how many weren't, you know.
Yeah, yeah. Especially if someone didn't want to lose that there was supposed to, then they might have a real fight then.
Yeah, or you know, one guy putting over another guy that he could have beaten. You
Yep.
know, that happened with who was it? Boss Rutan and I can't remember the dude with the incredible hair.
Oh, was it was it Shamrock?
No, no, it was I can't remember his name.
Hmm.
He was yeah, he beat Shamrock. Ah, man, I wish I could remember the name. If anybody in chat knows. Um yeah, and then Boss beat him later on, but he had like this incredible hair, like a almost like a mullet kind of thing.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
We'll have to let's go ahead and do a YouTube search right now for
All right, hold on. Now I got to find out.
it. Yeah, so for anybody who's interested in the Milagro, the graphic novel here, so the link will be below in the description. So it'd be for Milagro Héroe de las Calles. So even though the title is in Spanish, right? It's in English. There's English inside, right?
Yeah.
So
It's a yes. Yes, it's written in English, but we did have like a Spanish version that was coming out. That was actually translated from somebody who lived in Mexico City.
oh, awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know what's going on with that or how many people ordered that, but that is something that we did have. Like we wanted, again, we just wanted to try to have as much to represent, you know, like Mexico and give them just something to read, you know, because like I don't know if there's really any comic books quite like this, um, even like just like with Latinos in general, you know.
Yeah, I kind of agree because a lot of times like we still have like a lot of the Marvel stuff that it's like dominating. So then you'll get like instead of like a story of like real people like Milagro, you'll get a story of a super powered Latino or something, or so that's kind of what we're getting with people of color, right? We're getting a super powered person of color.
Or like the billionaire.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly.
Like the billionaire that's got like all the machines and all. Yeah, that was really important too. I wanted to like have people, just people that like were part of a community, you know, that kind of worked regular jobs that weren't like billionaires and had to make with the resources that they had,
Mm-hmm.
and just rely on their wits and their own courage and whatever they had available to them. And, no billionaires, no superpowers, none of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and ultimately they find what the true power in community, right? When people work together, you can accomplish a lot of things.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Even there is a central character, but it's very much like an ensemble kind of thing. These characters or stories all kind of intertwine. Um, they all come together as part of the story, and their story all contributes to like what where we eventually end up at the end.
All right, great. Well, that sounds great. So, is there anything else that you feel comfortable sharing about the story, or even about your process or anything?
I'm big on outlining. One thing that I mentioned this before, like somebody else asked me about that. There's two things that I use that work for me. There was how to write a screenplay in 21 days was a big help. And like Dan Harmon's Story Circle, which has like 8 different beats, which works really well for smaller pieces, like like individual issues of comics. Even though this is a graphic novel, it was the way it was like intended was just like a 3 issue arc.
Hmm.
So that tends to help out quite a bit, and just kind of immersing myself in different things. Like one thing that I did was to make sure that I read Mexican authors, um, preferably from Mexico City. There was one, Valeria Lucelli, collection called Sidewalks, that she, like all these different like essays that she wrote about Mexico City. Another one was Guadalupe Natal, Beozar, just different short stories that all kind of took place in Mexico City, and the poet Octavio Paz.
Hmm.
Those, it was important to like read stuff from Mexican writers and just try to get as much of that in the story as possible too.
Oh, that's wonderful. Yeah. All right. Well, then, yeah. Is there any way people can get in contact with you at all? Do you have any social media, or are you just like?
No, I'm still working on that. I'm terrible with that, man. I am still learning all of that. Um, yeah, no, I don't have anything. I don't even have a Facebook page for this name. Like, obviously, I have to use a different name when I write this stuff. Some of the stuff in there gets, it gets a little graphic, and sometimes employers don't always appreciate that kind of thing. So, but no, I have to get all of that.
All right. Actually, we have one comment from Pelon here. So, are you ready to? You're cool with answering the question?
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, of course, man.
Okay. So, Pelon asks, without giving too much away, how deep into the story of Milagro do you go given the opportunity? Or would you go? Or do you think you can go given the opportunity? But so, Pelon, does that mean like if he's able to, if Guillermo's able to make more issues, or?
Oh, I love the character. Any opportunity I get to make more, I'm gonna make more. You know, yeah. Whenever Matt says let's do it again, I'll do it. Well, I'm there. I'm already starting to work on outlining the next arc. I actually had an idea for another arc, but I feel like this one will help me earn a third arc, like the arc that I plan to do next. There needed to be like a transitional storyline to answer some questions and set up what I want to do with the other one. So I'm already like thinking like a couple story arcs down the road. And I'm already outlining the second one and just have a bunch of ideas stored in a file for the third one. So yeah, given any opportunity to do more, if there's any interest or any chance to do more, I'm all in.
All right. Yeah. So Pelon says, yeah, could this be an anthology?
I hope so.
Yeah.
That would be
Yeah.
nice. I mean, it depends how many people want to see more.
All right. So Paul Cherry, so A Hero with 1,000 Faces is a good book and maybe of some use.
Yep. Joseph Campbell. Yeah, no, it's a great book. I love the hero's journey, but I think it has like 12 different beats for 22 page, for like your average comic book issue, some are longer or whatever, but still just having those 8 beats for me gave me enough to work with. And plus, that story circle is kind of like a condensed version of the hero's journey that Dan Harmon created. That I think he might have made it just because like he worked with a lot of like half hour, 23-minute TV episodes, and it just fits really nicely with like individual issues of comics. But yeah, no, that Joseph Campbell's Hero with a Thousand Faces is definitely a great book.
All
George
right.
Lucas used that a lot for Star Wars, I believe.
Yeah, actually, do you want to kind of explain what the hero's journey is for people who might not know and might be interested?
So Joseph Campbell was like a psychologist, I believe, and like a Jungian, and he came up with this idea that like there were universal aspects to a story, right? And he had this thing that he called the hero's journey, and I don't remember each and every one of the beats, but the hero, like Star Wars, like Luke Skywalker's on Tatooine. No spoiler alerts here because everyone's seen it by now. But like eventually he is gonna go like you know become like this rebel or whatever, and then he decides he doesn't want to do it, and then he has to do it because his aunt and uncle are killed, and all these different things happen, right? And these are like universal things that are part of his story. So these are like the hero's journey and this story circle that it's based off of are known as narrative structures. And there's different ones that writers use to make sure that they get like all their beats together. Another one is like Save the Cat, that's pretty popular. That one has like 15 beats. Just for me, like whatever works for somebody is is what I would recommend. Like explore them all if they're interested in writing. But the one that's worked for me for comics and short stories the best so far has been a combination of like that cheesy like how to write a screenplay in 21 days, which isn't really that cheesy. It's just really practical. And then that story circle by Dan Harmon, which is based off the hero's journey.
Oh, nice. Actually, that sounds great. So for anybody, it sounds like we have people like Paul who made that comment where it's like I think some people are interested in like how to actually do this or how like the craft of writing. So I know it's a wrestling channel or whatever, but if anybody's interested in this stuff, I mean, we don't always have to only talk about wrestling. All right, so you have another question, or go ahead. Do you say something?
No. Thank you for letting us talk about this stuff. I mean, like I geek out about this as much as I do the wrestling. Like there is definitely comics is its own thing, right? Um, you have the reality of what can fit on the page, how many panels you can have on the page. You have what you see in your mind, and then you have what actually fits on the page, and then you have the artist's input. So for me, writing the comic book scripts is almost like a blueprint, right? You have to have the basic aspects of the story, the basic events and the beats, and you have to leave some space for a guy like Ross just to rock out and do whatever the hell he wants to some degree, to make like there's an image in the story of a bird. Do you know what I'm talking about, Raul?
Yeah, yeah, totally.
And that was Ross. I didn't write that. I didn't write it until like the very last time you see it. Like that was all Ross. That was Ross's
Mm.
idea. And I when you're working with like a killer artist, it's really or two killer artists, what Matt did with the colors, like if you just pick up the book and page through it, the colors just pop out, and that alone, that just catches people's attention right away. And you have to leave room for those guys to be able to do the things that they want. Like one thing that Matt requested in the third chapter was like, can you do something at night? Because he wanted to play around with like lighting and colors and things, and things that happen in that last chapter that add to the night. And um, so I wrote something that included the night. I found a reason to include the night. Like you just want to have all that stuff available when you're working with these artists.
Yeah, I think also too, like because this is kind of like a three chapters in one, right?
Mhm.
And so since we're talking about story, and a lot of times it's about getting the reader or the viewer, like if it's animation or whatever, like to want to see like what happens next. And I think that's what happens in Milagro because it almost like it's just you just continue reading. And in this case, since it's all in one volume, you just continue reading it, but it's like you want to continue reading it, you want to see what happens next. But if it was like a one chapter a week or something kind of like that, I think you you kind of this for a successful comic, because this is actually what happens in Japan. Like they have like a big weekly, like a lot of these really famous mangas and stuff. They'll have like a weekly chapter, and
Mhm.
I heard that like they get voted on, right? So like some the ones that have the best storytelling, they'll actually survive, right? The ones that don't have a good storytelling, then sometimes they'll get canceled. So there's like there's a real craft to making someone want to continue finding out the story.
In the chapters, the two chapters at least, the first two chapters, there's definitely like not necessarily like cliffhangers, but there's definitely things that like make you wonder what the hell's going to happen next. Like that was very much by design. Um, yeah, and that's just one of the strengths of writing comics. That's something that we all grew up with. Like you know, you'd finish like an individual issue and set up the next one, and you were like left wondering. Like here in the States, like you'd be left wondering for like a month what the hell happened to Spider-Man or whoever, you know.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, there's another question here. Okay, so Pelon asks, second question: have you incorporated any techniques Raul showed into your own grappling game?
I don't have a grappling game right now and haven't for a while, but I need to. I was actually training wrestling with a friend of ours, um, but the pandemic kind of picked up again. I injured my back, then I injured my knee. I'm getting old. Um, I need to take better care of myself. But yeah, I need to get back into my grappling game. And I haven't. I did like the closest thing I came to anything like that. I would kind of wrestle or like try to follow the techniques on my own, just try to get grips and things. You know, kind of like shadow boxing, I guess, without a partner when I was writing this stuff, just to try to write it accurately. Just to make sure that I had like I would one of the things that there's one of the panels that I'm really proud of that I wish I could give it away, but there's a detail that Ross got that essentially defends a punch, let's say, and just this one little detail, just it made all the difference, right? Um, so I tried to get as much of that as I could on my own, but now that the pandemic's starting to die down, yeah, I do plan to start grappling again, and I do plan on incorporating catch into it as much as I can.
All right. We have another question. Are you ready? Or we have
Yeah,
another
no,
comment.
all good.
So Paul Cherry asks, also perhaps if you're going for an anthology and you are doing it from the Mexican's perspective, you could add the concept of the 21 paths of each Orisha for different characters. They could embody the archetype of each Orisha. Do you know about that?
No,
Keep writing about it, Paul Cherry, so that
you know
so
about
we
that?
could.
The Orishas?
No, I don't.
I've never heard that before. Sounds pretty cool though. It sounds like the 36 Chambers of Death or something, but like,
Yeah, yeah, totally. So Paul, keep on type like the wind so that we can figure out what you're talking about. Yeah, but yeah, the thing about Mexico is that people don't realize how culturally diverse it is. I mean, there's several languages spoken there. It's not just, and that's the other thing. It's like I think maybe many people in the United States, like maybe many English monolingual people, don't realize that like the reason why a lot of people south of the U.S. border speak Spanish is not because it's their native language.
right,
It's the language of the people who did the conquest there. So
the
there's
colonizer tongue. Yep.
yeah, yeah. So there's all kinds of languages. Just even in, actually, um, right, just even in California itself, right? We have several different languages that were spoken here by different people. Same thing with Mexico. Same thing all the way down to Antarctica, right, or the tip of South America. Cool.
Any word on that 21? What is it? 21 Quechuas?
The 21 catch wrestlers. No, I was kidding. No, I was kidding. The Orisha, Orisha. So Paul said he's gonna try to write it up, but he's a slow writer. So, but we can talk about other things though too. in the meantime, Paul. So if anybody else has any questions, feel free to chime in.
Yeah, it was. I'm curious about. I've never heard of that.
Oh, he said it's part of Santaria.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Yeah, there's I don't want to give too much away, but there we allude to like indigenous practices in Milagro. We were talking about that earlier, Raul.
Yes, yeah.
It's
Okay.
yeah, it's definitely spelled out in a couple panels. I don't know how many people. I don't personally see how you could miss it. I mean, it's pretty much right there and like talked about. But yeah, there are definitely some practices there.
Yeah, so we have Pelon chiming in, says, "Yeah, Paul, Mexico City, or the DF, has a large African Cuban religious tradition. The biggest botanica in Mexico is in Mexico City, or the Distrito Federal, the DF."
Hmm.
And that,
One thing I will say is where the a bulk of the story takes place in a district called Iztapalapa in Mexico City. Um, I picked it because it was like I think it at the time, and I don't know if it still is. I started writing it in 2017, but at the time it was the poorest district in Mexico City. Um, and again, poverty definitely plays like a part in the story.
all right, so all right, we'll wait for a couple more questions, but yeah. So in the meantime, just let everyone know if you're interested in actually purchasing the the book. The link is below in the description. So feel free. Actually, you're telling me that it's almost sold out, right? Or
Yeah, we are almost out. There's Ross has a couple copies left. There's a few copies left at a place called Boulder Inc. In Boulder, Colorado. Or not Boulder, excuse me. Time Warp Comics. Boulder Inc. is a tattoo shop. Sorry. Time Warp Comics in Boulder, Colorado has a few, and then I think that's just about it. Um, yeah, there aren't that many left. Like we did not. I did. That's something I never even like considered was like running out. You know, I wasn't even sure we were going to get funded,
mm,
much less like worrying about running out of copies.
wow, that's amazing! Like, congratulations. That's awesome.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, I'm not ready for it. Like I don't have a website. We're running out of copies. Like we're just, we weren't completely ready for this yet.
Do you have like a digital copy of it there, like a PDF kind of that you would sell, or?
So I think Matt's trying to figure out a way to do that. That involves like getting like a web store and all this stuff. That's something that I believe he's working on. That yeah, as far as like the Kickstarter, all those types of things, Matt handled all of that, which
Hmm.
was pretty cool. He wanted just Ross and I just to focus on creating the comic. But I'm pretty sure he's still trying to figure all that out. And I'm hoping we get like a second edition. I think there's enough people that have shown some interest that maybe we could do another one.
Mhm. Okay. Yeah. Well, then all the more reason to actually make a website for it. Right?
Yeah, no, we definitely got to make a website. There's things that we definitely have to do. No doubt about that.
Yeah. Well, hopefully this live stream lit the fire for you, right?
Yeah, no, I really appreciate it. Thank you. Yeah, no, I just I was just so focused on just trying to write this that I just never thought about any other parts of it. I kind of had like tunnel vision. I just wanted to get the story down and focus on trying to set up future storylines too.
Mm,
Just even though I wasn't sure if we would get this one done. So yeah, I definitely got to get better with that kind of stuff.
yeah. Well, all the more reason to be confident now, right? People not only crowdfunded you without knowing the story, and then now that like you've almost run out of copies,
Yeah,
so be confident now and continue.
yeah. No, I would love to. Um, there's a lot more catch wrestling to be explored too. There's all kind, you can get into like the crazy training montages and sequences and things like that. You know, yeah, I mean, like I definitely drew from like a lot of like old time like fight manuals. Um, Farmer Burns had like a really good catch, or like had like an old like catch mail order thing, right? I think,
Yes.
yeah, I think I was like looking through that. I was definitely looking through like Jack Dempsey's book. I was definitely like going through your Escape series
Mm.
on YouTube. I can't remember which one I actually ended up using. Um, I think it was from the Turtle,
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
but yeah, I hope we get a chance to do more.
All right. Okay, I hope so. So, I don't want to hold you up much longer. We've been here for about an hour, so usually kind of call it quits around now. But is there any way that people can like at least? I think at least Milagro has like a Twitter, right?
Yeah. What is the Twitter? See, I'm like I said, I'm terrible at this. Um, Milagro comic. Hold on a second here. Yep, Milagro comic at Comic Milagro Twitter is where you can find us there. Um, and people can still get copies from Ross's website, rossradke.com, ROSSRADKE.com.
Yes, and that link is should be in the description below. So for anybody listening or watching, either we're on Twitch, also YouTube, and or it should be in the description in the audio version if you're listening to the podcast. So you should be able to just click on that. But yeah, so well, Paul Cherry has one more comment. Just wanted to
Yeah.
kind of quickly mention it. So yeah, I think he's excited about where this can go because he talks about like there's so many aspects to Mexican culture
Oh,
that
yeah.
yeah. So he's mentioning the different socio-political demographic things where there's all kinds of mixes between people who are maybe more European to people who are more indigenous, and there's like a broad spectrum, or even people from African descent or descent from other parts of the world, really. Because where I grew up in Southern California, people were always talking about the great Chinese food just south of where I grew up in Mexicali. So just across the border because there was a Chinese population there. So there's a big spectrum, right, in of lives and people in general in Mexico. So I'm glad Paul's getting excited. So I think these are all different things that can be explored in Milagro.
Oh, yeah. I definitely want to explore different aspects of Mexican culture, and I definitely want to explore other parts of Mexico. Like we kept it basically to Mexico City, and then a part. I don't want to give too much away, but a part out in West Mexico, where they eventually kind of end up, and that was definitely part of it. There are some socio-political things that are strongly alluded to, and traditions that are strongly brought up within the story visually.
Cool. So hopefully that's enough to get people
Yeah.
interested and buy in the graphic novel so they can find out all about it. All right. So we'll go ahead and sign off. So thank you very much, Guillermo, for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, hopefully we can have you again when the next volume comes out.
Well, I'm gonna start training, man. I want to method actor this for the next one. There's gonna be training elements in the next one if you get a chance to do it more. And yeah, I wanna go method actor. Bust out like bust out the knee pads, get on the mats, and
Yeah.
put some of this stuff to practice, and just take my licks, man. And just take my whoopings like a man.
All right. We'll go out there and we'll film some of the training.
I tap really quick.
Yeah, we got to film that.
Yeah,
So I'm going out to Colorado right now.
you're gonna come out here to tap me out. Cool.
That's right. That's right.
It'll be an honor. I do it really quick, man.
Okay, cool. So if anybody needs to, so Paul, you're commenting. So yeah, he's just interested in maybe contacting. So the best way to contact would be maybe through Twitter, then, right?
Yeah, find us on
Yeah.
Twitter. Yeah, Kickstarter too. Um, Leave a comment with, I'll get back to you. I'll see the comments eventually. Like these show up on YouTube, right?
Yes, they show up
Yeah,
on YouTube also. So yeah, yeah. All right, so Paul, you will not be forgotten.
you will
Yes.
not be forgotten, Paul. Thank you, man.
Okay, so we'll go ahead and sign off. Thank you very much. Thanks everyone for watching and listening, and thank you very much to our guest Guillermo Xegarra.
Take it easy, guys. Thanks.